We are live. What is up, fight nerds and dirty gamblers? I am Erik, and this is Erik Bets Fights. It's fight week once again, gang. Actually, it's a huge fight week. There's a bunch of stuff going on this week. PFL is happening right now. If you see me looking over here, it's because I've got PFL on the TV up there. I do have a bet on Emiliano Sordi, and that fight is starting right now. I'm going to try to give you all my attention, but I've got it up on the TV over there. But the primary purpose of this video is to break down UFC Vegas 52, headlined by Amanda Lemos and Jessica Andrade. But like I said, we've got PFL right now. We've got, I think, 2 Bellator cards going on this week. Like, if you are a person who's into betting fights and you've got the time to put in the work, there are a lot of fights to be bet this week. I try to stick to just UFC just because I just don't have time to do much else. Sometimes I tail people on some other things, but I don't have time to do the tape study and research on other promotions. If I didn't have a job and I did this for a living, man, I would bet every promotion. But anyway, so the primary purpose of this video is to do our breakdown for UFC Vegas 52, like I said. But first, we're going to do a quick recap of how the bets went for UFC Vegas 50, UFC Vegas 51. Yeah, that's what it was. The Luque versus Muhammad 2 card. We did lose. Full disclosure, the reason I'm doing the video right now is because my wife and stepkids are gone. They're going to be back in about an hour, so I'm trying to get through this kind of quickly because when they get home, they're likely going to walk right into this room on their way through. So I'm going to try to get it done before they get here. Anyway, we did lose 1.61 units on the Luque versus Muhammad card. Let's go through those bets really quickly. I did put half a unit on Wu Yanan at plus 400. I don't regret that bet at all. That's one of those situations I need to start kind of listening to myself more. That's one of those situations where I didn't understand what everyone was seeing. After watching the tape on that, I was like, I think this fight is pretty close. If you watched my breakdown video for that, I said, I think there's a decent chance that Wu is just the busier striker and has the better movement and just lands more strikes than Mayra Bueno Silva. I do think that's largely how the fight played out. I mean, Bueno Silva was the more powerful striker. She definitely landed the more effective strikes. It was a close fight. I saw a lot of people arguing that Wu Yanan won the fight. As I've mentioned, I don't really like score fights in my head while I'm watching. For the most part, I have to decide I'm going to do that ahead of time, and I wasn't. So I don't know. It was a close fight. I don't know who I would give it to. I'd have to watch it again. But at plus 400, I think that was a great bet because it played out really closely. Next up, I put 2 units on Jesse Ronson at plus 100. I honestly don't even have anything to say about that bet because, to be 100% transparent with you, I don't even really remember why I made that bet. Usually I can point out the exact reasons why I was choosing. I think it was just because Jesse Ronson, I'm trying to remember what my thoughts were. Jesse Ronson has twice as many pro fights. He's the bigger guy. He's got finishing upside, but yeah, he just didn't look great in that fight, and I don't think that was a great bet. Wouldn't make it again. Next up, we put 1.8 units on Martin Buday at minus 180. I was really glad I got that. I made that bet pretty early. That was actually one of those bets I made before doing the tape because I was like, I'm pretty sure that line's going to get worse and I want to jump on this. And the line did get up to minus 230, minus 240 or something like that. So we like that one. I mean, Buday is massive. Chris Barnett is massive, but not in the correct way. Chris Barnett is a meme fighter, doesn't really belong in the UFC. Nothing against the guy, and I think Martin Buday is a legit UFC level heavyweight. So kind of played out the way that we thought it would. Next up, I put 2.5 units on Trey Ogden against Jordan Levitt, and we lost that one. My read there was basically that, obviously Jordan Levitt is a dangerous grappler, but I did not think he was going to be effective on the feet, and he was able to stymie Ogden quite a bit just using leg kicks. My read was that Ogden is going to be the more physical guy. He's going to be the better wrestler. He's going to be the better striker, and those things are probably true, but he just couldn't really seem to deal with Jordan Levitt's leg kicks. So yeah, that fight didn't play out how I thought it would. So didn't look so great on the straight bets. Next up, looking at the props and parlays, I did parlay Penny Kianzad and Martin Buday at minus 103, put 2 units on that. That one hit for us. And then I had a few prop sprinkles. I did sprinkle on Brandon Jenkins by TKO in round 1 at plus 1,800. That was pretty much a narrative-based thing, especially after Drakkar Klose came out and talked about how he was still having issues from the injury against Jeremy Stephens when Jeremy Stephens pushed him at the weigh-ins. Sometimes I buy into those things too much, and I kind of did that there. I was like, if he's still having issues, maybe his chin is gone. Maybe Jenkins will be able to touch him and knock him out in the first round. And yeah, Brandon Jenkins isn't very good, and I knew that even when I made the bet. But yeah, he's not a UFC-level fighter, and I don't expect we'll see him in the UFC much longer, and Drakkar Klose looked pretty good. So I also sprinkled on Luque in round 4 and Luque in round 5. Got those at plus 1,400 and plus 2,000. Obviously, that didn't play out. Belal Muhammad was able to do Belal Muhammad things and win that fight with his wrestling. I sprinkled on Kroom by TKO at plus 650. Man, I had some bad bets. Kroom got smoked out of there in a matter of seconds, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, that did not come close to happening. And then I did sprinkle on Paniki Andrade to win by TKO in round 3 at plus 2,200. I was basing that on well, first of all, obviously it was 10 years ago, but when Pannie Kianzad and Lena Landsberg fought the first time, that's what happened. Kianzad won by TKO in round 3. I thought it was a likely enough outcome that it was worth plus 2,200. I did expect the fight to go to decision, but I thought, hey, if we're seeing Landsberg slow down quite a bit and we're seeing Kianzad crank it up, maybe it could happen. Obviously did not happen. So we lost 1.61 units on that event, putting us, we've been over 60 units for a while now. We dropped down to 59.99 units. So that's kind of a bummer. Plus, actually, it's going to be a little bit lower than that because I have some bets on PFL and I lost a bet on Victor Peshta. And I think if Sorty wins here, we are going to hit a parlay that I put down, but it's not going to be enough to get back what I lost on Peshta. So it's going to be a small loss there. But anyway, enough about that. Let's go ahead and get to the meat and potatoes of this video. The reason that you're here, the UFC Vegas 52 breakdown. I've got 14 pages of notes on this, and I've got a bunch of stats I want to talk about in some of these fights, so I'm going to be pretty reliant on my notes here as far as things I want to talk about. But anyway, the card is going to kick off with Dean Barry versus Mike Jackson, which, I mean, it's kind of a circus fight. It's not a UFC level fight. I don't think I'm saying anything that surprises anyone there. And the odds on this fight are absolutely insane. Dean Barry is minus 1,000. He's as high as minus 1,500 in spots. And you can get Mike Jackson for plus 750. Now, I sort of feel like it's not a bad idea to put something on Mike Jackson here at plus 750, simply because if you told me, all right, there's a fight going down between two low-level fighters, neither of them are very good, and I'll give you plus 750 on either one of them. Like, that's probably like a winning approach in the long run. However, I kind of understand, even though these guys are both low level and probably don't necessarily belong in the UFC, it kind of does make sense because Dean Barry is at least an MMA fighter. He's a pro MMA fighter who is looking to make his mark, is looking to get better, is looking to have a career in pro MMA. Mike Jackson's not even really a fighter. He's a martial artist, sure, and he's done some training to fight. I'm not trying to disparage him, but I mean, he's basically said so himself. He's a photographer. He's interested in photography, also like entertainment and like doing promo work and stuff like that. That's kind of what he's interested in. He likes martial arts. He likes being around the fight game, but he's not really somebody who's looking to build a career as a pro fighter. Really, the only reason Mike Jackson is even in the UFC, I kind of looked into this because I was really curious how this came to be. Mike Jackson was friends with Mick Maynard years and years ago. Jackson's first amateur fight was actually in a promotion called Lone Star Beatdown in Texas, which was owned by Mick Maynard. And later he did photography and produced online content for Legacy FC, which Maynard was either owning or like operating at the time. And so he had that connection with Mick Maynard, which is why they ended up bringing him in to put Mickey Gall over. Like they basically needed someone who was a fighter, but wasn't very good, so that they could get Mickey Gall a win, so that it made sense to have Mickey Gall fight CM Punk, if that makes sense. I mean, that's pretty much why Mike Jackson was brought in. And I don't know if it's just that, and that was years ago. When did Mike Jackson fight CM Punk? In 2016 or something? I don't know if it was that long ago, but it was quite a while ago. And so I don't know if it's just that Mike Jackson's still got a fight on his contract or what the deal is exactly, but apparently they need to give Mike Jackson one more fight. They've booked this Mike Jackson Dean Barry fight like 2 or 3 times already, and it's been canceled. So apparently they really want Dean Barry to fight Mike Jackson. And I'm guessing it's because they want to put Dean Barry over because Mike Jackson's not very good and Dean Barry's going to beat him. But anyway, to get to a little bit of actual technical breakdown here, Mike Jackson just isn't very good. He's allegedly a boxer and kickboxer. He doesn't throw a lot of strikes. He keeps his chin way up in the air. I don't think he's got a very good chin because the first shot that Mickey Gall caught him with dropped him. Dean Barry is he's kind of a karate style striker. He's one of those guys who has kind of a sideways stance. He kind of bounces on his toes, sort of like you'll see at like a point sparring competition. He does have some power. He has I think he's 4-1, I think, and he's finished all 4 of those opponents. His one loss was against a guy who didn't have a very good record, and I think he was choked out by the guy in the second round. So he's able to do well. He's able to overwhelm lower level fighters early with his striking, but I have my doubts about what kind of game he's going to have if he's in there against somebody decent and is taken past that first round and isn't able to overwhelm them with that striking. But I don't think we're going to find out the answers to those questions here, because I think there's every reason to believe that he's probably going to make Mike Jackson another first round victim here. So I don't know. I didn't look at Dean Barry. Like I said, he's minus 1,000 to minus 1,500. I don't know. My book that has props didn't have any props on this last I looked, but if you can find Dean Barry inside the distance or by KO or even by KO in round 1, if you can get some good numbers on those, it might be worth a look. But otherwise, I wouldn't touch this fight. I wouldn't parlay Dean Barry or at that number or anything like that. You just don't get enough value out of doing that. Next fight is, I'm sorry, I'm looking up at PFL here. I think, did Emiliano Sordi just lose? I'm not sure. Anyway, next fight up is Marcin Prachniow versus Philippe Linz. This is in the light heavyweight division, I believe. What are our betting? Pretty close fight. Prachniow is favored at minus 117. You can get Philippe Linz, small underdog, at plus 110. Linz has been fighting at heavyweight. He's coming down to light heavyweight here. He has fought at light heavyweight in the past. Linz, he really isn't very good. He's got some power in his hands. He's got pretty fast hands, especially for a heavyweight. I don't know if his hands are going to be, relatively as fast here at light heavyweight. But my general read on Philippe Linz is that he's kind of reliant on finding a finish in order to win, because he just doesn't put out that much volume. Sorry, I'm gonna have to look at my notes a little bit here. So Linz went 3-3 in Bellator. Then he had a 4-0 run in PFL, and now he's gone 0-2 in the UFC so far. And he hasn't fought in almost 2 years. His last fight, he was finished by Tanner Boser in round 1 back in June 2020. But yeah, like I said, Linz has the finishing upside here, but my concern is that if he doesn't find the finish, he just doesn't really have enough output to win a decision. So looking at their striking stats, Marcin Prachniow throws almost twice as many significant strikes per minute and lands over twice as many significant strikes per minute as compared to Philippe Linz. Marcin has 51% striking accuracy to Linz's 40%. He also has much better striking defense and a better knockdown rate, interestingly enough. Marcin Prachniow has been finished by strikes 4 times in 5 losses, with 3 of those being his first 3 UFC fights, which were against Sam Alvey, Magomed Ankalaev, and Mike Rodriguez. So, something like that, being finished by strikes 3 times in a row doesn't bode well against somebody who does have knockout power like Philippe Linz. But, Prachniow looked pretty good in his last couple fights. He looked pretty good against Khalil Roundtree. And yeah, I don't have a strong feeling on this fight. I'm not betting anything, but I do kind of lean toward Marcin Prachniow to be able to, avoid getting finished and to win a decision. If I was going to bet the fight, I don't know. I feel like if you're going to bet Philippe Linz, probably bet him inside the distance, because I don't see him winning a decision here. Otherwise, I would maybe bet Prachniow by a decision. But yeah, I'm not interested in betting anything here at the moment. Next up, we've got Cameron Else versus Archie Lang. So lately, when people Else has fought in the UFC once before, but like newer UFC fighters, when they're making their debut or they're just a couple fights in, I've been enjoying like really digging into their record and digging into their past. And I kind of did that with Cameron Else a little bit here. So I'm going to use my notes here, but I'm going to talk about Cameron Else a little bit. So Cameron Else started his pro career 4-4, and then he went on a 6-fight win streak to get the call up to the UFC, where he debuted against Kyler Phillips. Obviously, pretty tough draw for your first fight in the UFC. This was back in October 2020. And he hasn't fought since. He did have some impressive moments on the ground versus Kyler Phillips. I think he was able to sweep Kyler Phillips, I think 2 different times, and kind of get out of tough positions on the ground. As a striker, he's a little bit flat-footed. He doesn't seem especially athletic or anything. Okay, well, here's where it gets interesting. All 10 of Cameron Else's pro wins are by first-round finish, including an anaconda choke, over Paddy Pimblett way back in 2013. However, those 10 opponents that he beat prior to coming to the UFC had a combined pro record of 18-17. So let me say that again. 10 fighters, combined pro record of 18-17. So very, not a great winning record, and also just very low level experience. And a big part of the reason that they even had that much experience, 18 and 17, was because he fought a guy named Brad Evans, who was 3-14. So if you take Brad Evans out, you're looking at a bunch of fighters who were like 1-0, 0-0, 0-1. So without Brad Evans, the fighters that he fought would have been 15-3, which is a decent sounding winning record, but we're talking about 9 fighters with 18 fights between them. So yeah, they averaged like 2 fights each. So he was fighting a lot of very low level competition. The 4 fighters he lost to before coming to the UFC combined for 34-18 record. So he's definitely struggled when he's stepped up against more experienced competition. Here's an interesting factoid about Cameron Else. Anytime his opponent has had more than 4 wins, Cameron Else has lost. Let me say that again in a different way. Cameron Else has never beat a fighter with more than 4 pro wins. So I think that's, definitely something to consider here. And if you watch his regional tape, he's been finished in 4 of his 5 losses. And if you watch his tape, you'll see him struggling against like 0-0 fighters. He eventually wins, but he does struggle early against fighters who are not very good and don't have a lot of experience. Looking at Archie Lang, he's a decent striker. He can be taken down and controlled on the ground, which could be a path to victory for Else here, but I don't see that as terribly likely. I think Archie Lang, he has the athleticism, the skills, and the experience to handle himself okay, I think, in those spots. He does like to apply pressure. He does have some offensive wrestling of his own that he doesn't necessarily look to use regularly, but it's there. I think he transitions well between different phases of the game. He throws nice, hard, straight punches right down the pipe. And he's one of those fighters who will crank up his output as the fight progresses. Once he finds his reads and finds his rhythm, he will crank up his output and sort of start feeling himself as the fight goes on. Cameron Else is always going to be live, I suppose, early in round 1. Like I said, all 10 of his wins are by round 1 finish. Was that right? I think so. Yeah. So, but I think Archie Lang is a huge step up in competition for him here. He already fought Kyler Phillips, but compared to the people he's beat, it's a huge step up in competition. I do favor Archie Lang pretty highly here, and I actually did end up betting him. Let me take a look at what the odds are at currently. Archie Lang is -230, Cameron Else +200. I think I got Archie Lang at like -215 or something like that. I put a little over 2 units on him. We will obviously go over the bets that I have when we get to the end of the card here. Next up, Tyson Pedro versus Ike Villanueva in the light heavyweight division. Really big spread on the odds here. Tyson Pedro is like -550, even -600 or better. Ike Villanueva can be had for +450. Tyson Pedro hasn't fought in over 3 years, and it was because he had a reconstructive knee surgery. But even with those things in mind, I think it makes sense that the number looks the way it does. If these guys were at 100%, Tyson Pedro is the better fighter by miles and miles and miles. Tyson Pedro he's big, he's athletic, he's really quick for being such a big guy. He's got a solid striking game, he's got a solid grappling game. He's one of those guys who, I thought pretty highly of, and then I kind of forgot about him because, like I said, he hasn't fought in 3 years, and all of a sudden he shows up, and I was like, Tyson Pedro, I thought he like retired or something. I didn't know what was going on with him, but he was somebody I thought pretty highly of when he was around. And Ike Villanueva is one of those guys, by all accounts, he's a really nice guy. Everybody really likes him. He's a tough guy. He hits hard, but he's just not a real, he doesn't have a real high skill level. He's not really a fighter who probably belongs at the UFC level. So we're looking at, a very promising, very athletic, very skilled light heavyweight versus, a guy who just technically, to be quite honest, isn't particularly technical or skilled. So, I definitely favor Tyson Pedro here. Huge. I guess I don't hate throwing him in a parlay. I haven't yet, just because I am a little bit concerned about him having been out for so long and the knee surgery and stuff like that. But, I probably shouldn't read too much into that. Like I made the mistake last week, like I said, of reading into the things Jakar Close said. Like, if Tyson Pedro wasn't ready to fight, if his knee was still a problem or anything like that, he wouldn't be fighting. He waited over 3 years to do it. So I suppose he's not going to come back until he feels like he's ready or whatever. But anyway, let's actually talk about talk about these guys technically a little bit. Pedro's last fight was a loss to Shogun in late 2018, which, I mean, a loss to Shogun doesn't look great at this point in time, but, you know, the knee injury actually happened in that fight, and he was doing well against Shogun. His knee basically gave out on him in that fight, and that's why he ended up having that surgery. He's like I said, he's really quick and really athletic for a guy who's so big. He's got really nice Muay Thai in the clinch. He's comfortable in the clinch. He'll use elbows and knees in the clinch, which I'm a huge fan of. I also love, he does this Karo Parisian style when his opponent is in on his hips looking for a takedown, he'll grab the Kimura while standing. If you remember Karo Parisian, specifically in his fight against Dave Strasser, you'll see him do this. Karo would often defend takedowns that way. While somebody was in on his hips, he would grab the Kimura standing, and then he's able to like roll into the Kimura. And it's a super sweet technique to see. And Tyson Pedro does that. So I love to see that. Ike Villanueva, like I said, he's kind of a low level brawler. He's 18-13 overall, 1-4 in the UFC. Doesn't really belong at this level. He's been finished in all 4 of his UFC losses. And I expect that we will see the same thing here. Like I said, I'm picking Tyson Pedro very comfortably here. I haven't placed any bets. If I was going to, I'd maybe look at like the under 1.5. Like I said, Villanueva's been finished in all of his UFC losses, and Pedro is a guy who does tend to find quick finishes, so we could see that happen here. Next fight, we're looking at Dwight Grant versus Sergey Handocho. This is a fight where straight up, I just don't feel like I have a great read. I don't have a lot of interest in this fight. I'd like to just skip it and move on to the next one, but I suppose I better, since it's a full card breakdown, I better talk about it a little bit. But Dwight Grant is 3-3 in the UFC. He's coming off a decision loss to old man Francisco Trinaldo. One thing I always notice about Dwight Grant when he's in the ring, and if you've never noticed this before, take a look. He's all limbs. The guy has like no torso. His legs and arms are super long, and then he's just got like a tiny little torso. Like, I would love to see somebody try to finish Dwight Grant by body kick. Like when people were joking that you can't choke Alir Latifi because he doesn't have a neck. Yeah, you can't body kick Dwight Grant because he doesn't have a body. But anyway, Dwight Grant he's very quick and athletic. He's got those long limbs, like I said, that are nice for a striker to have. He's the kind of guy who doesn't throw to touch you, he throws to hurt you. So, sometimes he could be a little busier. I think he tends to just paw forward with that lead hand a lot to set up the big right cross. And he's, the big power right cross rather than just kind of looking to keep some strikes out there. He does tend to back up and paw with that lead hand a lot, rather than trying to push forward. And sometimes he'll kind of let the fight slip away from him without throwing enough, is one thing that I've noticed. Sergey Handocho, he's a fighter who looks to stay at range. He's a kickboxer, but there's something a little bit karate-esque to his kickboxing game, I would say. Just kind of the way his stance and the way that he throws his techniques and the way he carries himself. He doesn't tend to press the action much. He kind of accepts the pace and the fight that his opponent gives him, and I think Dwight Grant kind of does that too. These guys both tend to kind of move backwards, not really look to force anything, look to kind of find opportunities to counter. Grant does, according to the numbers, Grant does throw more strikes and land more strikes. He also has 100% takedown accuracy. He's attempted 3 takedowns and got all 3 of them, according to the stats. And he has 70% takedown defense, which is pretty good. I was just sharing random stats for you there. I guess I'm going to pick Dwight Grant. I don't really have a good reason to. Like I said, I don't have much of a read on this fight. Don't have much interest in this fight. If I was going to bet it, I guess I would bet Dwight Grant. I don't know. Don't take anything that I've said about this fight to heart in your betting, because I feel I feel like every card there's a fight where I just don't have that much interest while I'm doing tape. And by the time I have a terrible memory anyway. And it's like by the time I finish tape on one of those fights, I've almost forgotten everything that happened. That's kind of how I feel about this fight. So it's a pass for me. Next up, a fight that I am quite interested in because it should be exciting. Jordan Wright versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Oh, the odds have been moving here. Marc-Andre Barriault is a favorite at -163. Jordan Wright can be had for +170. He was at more like +120, +130 range, I think, a couple days ago. But I did put a bet on this fight. I'm just going to tell you straight up what that bet was. I got a prop at +1,000 Jordan Wright by KO in round 1, because Jordan Wright is the glass cannon to end all glass cannons, right? He is the ultimate kill or be killed fighter. He comes out like a bat out of hell. He looks to take your head off. He has an excellent offensive game. Good Muay Thai. He'll clinch up. He'll throw knees. He'll throw elbows. He'll throw spinning kicks. He truly is the Beverly Hills Ninja. However, like I said, glass cannon. He can't take much of a shot. He's all aggression. He's all offense. He's no defense. He does tend to get caught. He does tend to get hurt. So if he doesn't get you out of there quickly, you're probably going to get him out of there quickly most of the time. Marc-Andre Barriault is a very different fighter. He's not a guy who uncorks like super powerful offense. He's not a guy who looks to get you out of there. He's one of those guys who I describe as like the fighter that kind of shows up with his lunch pail in his hand and just sort of goes to work. He's just I don't want to say journeyman in the negative sense, but he's a workman-like fighter who just kind of keeps a consistent pace. He's not going to blow anybody's hair back. He doesn't have any one area in which he's super, super skilled, but he's got solid skills everywhere. So it makes for an interesting matchup. Oh, and also another important thing to keep in mind here is that in Marc-Andre Barriault's last fight, he got knocked out in 16 seconds by Chidi Njokuani. And I don't think that had ever happened to Marc-Andre Barriault before, but he's going up against a guy who's going to look to get him out of there in 16 seconds in round one. And that just happened to him in his last fight. So something interesting to consider. And considering that Jordan Wright wins, anytime Jordan Wright wins, it's by KO in round one. The fact that I was able to get that at plus 1,000, usually I only do 0.2 units on these sprinkles. I went half a unit on that because I thought that was a good number. And Jordan Wright winning this fight by KO in round one is a pretty likely outcome, I think, actually. Because like I've got some of these numbers here. I wish I could remember. I'm gonna go through some of these notes here. In 14 pro fights, Jordan Wright has been outside round one twice and outside round two never. So again, in 14 pro fights, 12 of them have ended in round one, and 2 of them have ended in round two. He's never been to round three. So that's this, you can expect that this fight is going to be over pretty quickly. So yeah, if you're looking to bet something here, I don't mind a sprinkle on that Jordan Wright by KO in round one. Otherwise, I would maybe look. I'm not even what the unders are set at a river. Probably 1.5. I don't know if I'd go under 1.5, maybe, or the fight doesn't go to decision. I'm guessing the fight doesn't go to decision is probably super juiced, but something to consider anyway. Next fight up, this is a little bit of a people's main event. I think this fight should be a lot of fun. This should be a fight of the night contender here. Charles Jourdain versus Lando Venata. I like both of these guys a lot. Lando Venata has a special place in my heart because if you remember his UFC debut, it was against Tony Ferguson, and he looked really good and hurt Tony Ferguson. And it was, considering making his debut against somebody like Tony Ferguson, and I was there for it live too. It was in Sioux Falls at the Denny Sanford Premier Center, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So yeah, I got to see that fight live, and it was very exciting. Anyway, like I said, this fight will be fun. Fight of the night contender. Both guys are skilled and technical, but also kind of wild and crazy. So I think that makes for a fun fight. To break down their styles a little bit, Charles Jourdain, he's kind of more of a plodding Muay Thai type fighter. He doesn't use a lot of movement. He's just a little bit more of that kind of flat-footed Muay Thai style. He does keep his chin tucked and keep his hands up in a, like I said, pretty typical, technical Muay Thai type of stance. He throws nice leg kicks. He applies pretty good forward pressure. To give you some stats on his striking, Charles Jourdain attempts 11.6 significant strikes per minute and lands 5.7. So some good numbers there. He also has 60% striking defense. He's attempted only 3 takedowns in the UFC and has landed none of them. And he has 48% takedown defense. He's also one of those guys who tends to come alive as the fight progresses. And I think you could argue that round 3, Charles Jourdain is one of those mythical fighters. He's one of those dudes who, my computer's trying to do some, okay. He's one of those guys. Yeah. Round 3, Charles Jourdain is a mythical fighter. He comes alive and looks to take your head off in round 3. It's fun to watch. Lando Venata is, he is a pretty technical striker, but in a much looser way than how Charles Jourdain fights. Like I said, Jourdain keeps his chin tucked. He keeps a pretty tight guard up. Lando likes to keep his hands down. He has more of a loose flowing style. Actually, after that, like I said, I was there in person when Lando fought Tony Ferguson. I used to email Jordan Breen once in a while back in the day and just ask him questions, because I've always been a huge Jordan Breen fan. If you don't know Jordan Breen, he was one of the Sherdog radio guys for years back in the day. He's fallen off the map a little bit. He's still on Twitter, but I don't think he's not really doing podcasts and stuff anymore. But anyway, I remember emailing Jordan Breen after that fight and being like, "Hey man, do you know much about Lando Venata's background? Like, did he train traditional martial arts growing up or what?" Because he's just got a very, kind of taekwondo traditional martial arts sort of style. He uses a lot of lateral movement. And like I said, he keeps it pretty loose, kind of a tough guy to figure out with his hands down, using weird movement, side to side, footwork, that sort of thing. Let's see. I've got some stats here. Takedown. Not that I think that Lando's going to have to deal with takedowns from Charles Jourdain anyway, but I just thought that this was kind of interesting. When Lando fought Mike Grundy attempted 20 takedowns in that fight and only got 3 of them. So that's some pretty good takedown defense numbers there. I do think this is kind of a tough fight to call. Lando Venata, even though he's known as a stand-up fighter, he is a solid wrestler. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's one of the myriad of UFC fighters who has the USA wrestling tattoo. I think, if I remember correctly, he has it on his back. So yeah, I don't know his exact wrestling credentials, but I know he was a decorated wrestler. He doesn't choose to use his wrestling a lot, but I think that could be a clear path to victory for him here if he did choose to use his wrestling. So yeah, but this is one of those, like I always say, we don't want to bet on what a fighter can do. We want to bet on what a fighter will do. If we had good reason to believe that Lando Venata was going to come out here and wrestle, I think he'd be a very solid bet here. And I just realized I didn't pull up the betting lines on this one, did I? It's a close. I know it's really close. Jourdain is slightly favored at -110. Venata +105. So basically a coin flip. But yeah, I ended up, I agree with the odds. I do think it's a really close fight, but since I don't necessarily think Lando Venata is going to look to wrestle, I think the fight should be exciting and competitive on the feet, but I just favor Jourdain to be busier and to land more and to crank it up as the fight goes on. And also the fact that he's got the better striking defense. He keeps his guard up and that sort of thing. So I do favor Jourdain to win a decision here, but it's not a super, confident or comfortable pick. I did bet the over 2.5 here because I do think this fight goes to decision. I can't remember what line I got on that, but like I said, we'll go over the bets when we get to the end here and I will let you know. We're making pretty good time. Only 4 fights left. All right. Next up is Manel Kape versus Suma Derj. This is another fight where I don't really have a super strong read. These guys are both, decent strikers who mostly look to just use their striking games. Manel Kape spent a long time in Rizin, and he's now 2-2 in the UFC with 2 wins by finish and 2 losses by decision. His last 2 fights were late round 1 finishes against Zhalgas Zalmagulov and Ode Osborne. So he is coming off 2 really impressive early finishes, which is nice to see. In 6 losses, Kape has been subbed once, and he's never been KO'd. He's quick. He's very, very fast. He has fast hands. He uses a lot of feints. He stays on his bike. He moves a lot. He's a guy who's really looking to counter. He's looking to use his feints to draw out strikes from his opponents so he can counter. I feel like he picks his spots really well. He does land really hard. Interestingly, Kape and Suma Derj have almost identical offensive striking stats with both around 52% striking accuracy, but Suma Derj has 68% striking defense and Manel Kape has only 51. So we're looking at a 17% difference in striking defense in favor of Suma Derj there. So that's something that really kind of stood out to me as I was researching this fight. When Kape is on, he's a really sharp counter striker. And, obviously he's clearly been on in his last 2 fights because he did find those early finishes. But like I said, the difference in the striking defense, Kape does get hit a lot. And if you watch the way he fights, one thing that kind of struck out in my brain is it almost seems like he gets so hyper-focused on offense, on watching his opponent and finding those spots that he almost forgets to be defensive, because he's like already, when he sees that strike coming, he's already concentrating on how he's going to counter and looking to find his spot, and he forgets to like, either keep a guard up or move his head or use footwork, whatever. He's like, he forgets to try to not get hit himself, I guess. Sumaderj is 3-1 in the UFC. He's currently on a 3-fight streak after losing his UFC debut by submission to Louis Smolka. However, those 3 wins haven't been against the highest level competition. It was Andrei Sukumta, Malcolm Gordon, and Zaruk Adashev. So, he does have those 3 wins, but this is a big step up in competition. Manel Kape, as compared to those 3 fighters, it is definitely a big step. I think this could be a close fight. I do favor Kape to be able to close the distance, to probably pressure Sumaderj, to draw him in with feints and to land the better shots. However, like I said, Sumaderj does have the much better striking defense with this. I think Kape will land the better shots, but considering how well Sumaderj defends, I think Sumaderj could end up landing more shots. So even though I do slightly lean Manel Kape to win here, it's not by much. And there's been some line movement today specifically. You can get Sumaderj up at plus 175 now, which is implied like 36% implied or something like that. And I would line him maybe more like, I don't know, 45% or something like that. Like I think I lean Kape to win, but not by much. I think it could be a close fight. So I haven't bet this, but I actually don't mind looking at a bet on Sumaderj at plus 175. If that line gets a little bit better, like I'm considering putting something on that plus 175. If it gets up even higher than that, plus 180, plus 190 or something, I will almost definitely end up betting that, because I do think that this fight could play out pretty closely and should probably be lined more closely than that. Next up, we've got Macy Barber versus Montana De La Rosa. The first thing I noticed when I started to dig into this fight was the striking stats. Okay, Macy Barber throws 9.4 significant strikes per minute and lands 4.6. Montana De La Rosa throws 7.6 significant strikes per second and lands only 2.8. That's really low. So Barber has 49% striking accuracy to Montana's 37% striking accuracy. I mean, 49 isn't fantastic. It's decent. But 37% striking accuracy is pretty low. This is a fight where Montana De La Rosa, not to oversimplify it, but it's a bit of a striker versus grappler matchup. Barber's going to look to keep this on the feet and use her boxing. De La Rosa is going to look to get it on the ground and use her grappling. However, Montana has only 31% takedown accuracy, which is quite low, but she does have 43% control time against her opponents, which is quite good. Barber does have 66% takedown accuracy. So if you compare Montana's takedown defense. So if you compare Montana's 31% takedown accuracy and then look at Barber having 66% takedown defense, also, I think Barber is going to be the stronger and more physical of the two. So I think that Montana De La Rosa might struggle to get the fight to the ground here. Macy Barber is 4-2 in the UFC with decision losses to Roxanne Modafferi and Alexa Grasso. I bet Roxanne Modafferi in that fight. That was awesome. I love Roxy. How can you not, right? Like I said, Barber is, she's reasonably athletic and well-rounded. She hits pretty hard. Montana De La Rosa, if you count the Tough House, she's 6-3-1 in the UFC. She was a high school wrestler, and then she obviously went on to work on her BJJ. She has 8 submission wins, and 5 of those are by armbar. Like I said, I'm just looking at my notes here. One thing I need to do, I'm a very, you've probably figured out by watching my videos, my brain is kind of all over the place. I'm not a particularly organized person. So I have these notes and they're not even really organized in any kind of way. So I just kind of jump around and throw out stats at you. That's going to be one nice thing. I'm going to go ahead and plug the MMA engine here. That's going to be one great thing for content creators when the MMA engine comes out, is that it's specifically set up so that you can put specific stats on the screen and then share your screen. So whatever specific stats you want to discuss for a fight, you can choose those stats. I don't know how it's going to work exactly, the layout, but you'll be able to choose which stats you want displayed on the screen. So I'll be able to just have those right there for you. But anyway, Montana does seem to have a pretty solid chin, but I think she's she struggles to get her grappling going against an opponent with decent takedown defense and somebody who she's not able to have a physicality advantage over. And I think Barber is somebody who will be more physical here. So not a super confident pick, but I think Montana De La Rosa is going to struggle to get her game going. I do think it makes sense to lean Macy Barber here. And I just realized I don't think I pulled up the betting lines. Oh, Barber is favored. She's a pretty big favorite, -175. Okay, I guess that's about where she's been the whole time. I was thinking she was a smaller favorite than that. And Montana De La Rosa can be had for +163. Not interested in a bet on that fight at the moment. Wow, we're almost at the end here. Making good time. Awesome. Next up, we've got Clay Guida versus Claudio Polish. What do you say about Clay Guida? Obviously, the guy is a legend of the sport. He's 40 years old. He still comes in there and brings it. He's already in the UFC Hall of Fame for his fight with Diego Sanchez, and I think he'll probably end up in the UFC Hall of Fame as an individual athlete eventually as well. A fun note: I attended when the Guida and Diego Sanchez fight was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I attended that Hall of Fame ceremony, and it was at the Pearl at the Palms, and I sat up in the bleachers. I sat up in the balcony, and there was an earthquake during the event. You can actually look up a video of this. Rashad Evans was on stage presenting when the earthquake happened, and Rashad just stopped and was like, "What was that? Was that an earthquake?" But anyway, yeah, Google it. You can actually, if you Google Rashad Evans Hall of Fame earthquake or something like that, you can find a video of that happening. But yeah, I was up in the balcony, and the balcony literally swayed. It was crazy. Anyway, I'm always going off on tangents. Clay Guida currently has 32 UFC bouts, which is good for 6th all time. He's a guy he's known for his movement and his relentless cardio. He doesn't have necessarily one area where he really stands out skill-wise. He's pretty solid everywhere. He's a decent boxer. He's a decent wrestler. Doesn't have the greatest sub defense. He's definitely been subbed a few times. But what he's really known for is just that relentless pace and cardio. The guy can fight 5 rounds, and then when the fight's over, he's going to get up and he's still going to be running in place and jogging and whatever. He is the Energizer Bunny. He's unstoppable. Like I said, he has had issues with his sub defense. He's been subbed, I think, at least 7 times in his career. It's hard to say sometimes on Tapology, like the earlier fights, sometimes it doesn't show you, if they were in smaller promotions, it doesn't show you how they actually ended. But anyway, Claudio Polish is a guy that I've kind of struggled to get a read on. I feel like he's capable of moments of brilliance in the cage, but he's also capable of, he still looks pretty green at times, and he still looks like he's kind of figuring things out, which I guess makes sense because he is only 25 years old. He's had 13 pro fights. He's going to be getting better and better all the time. But I don't feel like I have a really strong read on who he is and what he's capable of at this point in time. He's 4-1 in the UFC. He lost his debut to Martin Bravo, and he's won 4 in a row since then, including 2 by knee bar, which is pretty cool. He had that knee bar against Chris Gritzmacher in kind of a weird fight. But anyway, as DC points out in several of Polish's fights, I believe, even though, he does want to get it on the ground because he is a venomous grappler, but he doesn't have the greatest takedowns. DC points that out several times about how his takedown attempts are kind of ugly, and he kind of struggles to make those work for him. So my overall read on this fight is it's tough to know where the fight's going to end up playing out. Here's what I mean by that. Claudio Polish will likely have a huge advantage if the fight goes to the ground. But I don't know that Claudio Polish is going to be able to get takedowns on Clay Guida to get the fight to the ground. However, Clay Guida will likely have the upper hand in the stand-up. I mean, he's quite a bit smaller, but he's busy. He's not a guy who's likely going to knock you out. But if it plays out on the feet, he's likely going to be, obviously having the better movement, the better output. He's going to be landing strikes. But the thing about Clay Guida is that he doesn't always have the best fight IQ. Like there are times when he'll just suddenly look to take the fight to the ground, even though that might not be the best idea, even though he's getting the best of the stand-up. Like, it would not shock me in this fight to see Clay Guida getting the best of the stand-up and then all of a sudden just decide he wants to shoot and take Claudio Polish down and then get submitted. So it's hard. I don't feel like I have a strong read on how this fight is going to play out, which is why I'm having a hard time making a pick here. But let let's see. Clay Guida, to go back to some stats here, Clay Guida does have almost 73% takedown defense. And here's an interesting stat. He has been controlled less than 9% of the time in his 32 octagon appearances. That's pretty good. He's been controlled by his opponent less than 9% of the time. So, is it reasonable to assume that Claudio Polish is not going to be able to get Clay Guida down and control him for long spells of time? Considering how that's tended to go, it might be reasonable to assume that. And like I said, if it plays out on the feet, I think he'll get outboxed to a decision. So yeah, I guess I'm going to lean Clay Guida to win by decision here. But this is one of those, sometimes I recommend doing this, and not like recommend, I just sort of throw it out there. I don't really do it myself, but this is one of those where you could maybe even look to bet Clay Guida by decision and bet Claudio Polish by submission and come out the winner either way. But I don't know. I personally haven't bet it. I'm going to lean Clay Guida by decision based on the idea that Claudio Polish might not be able to get those takedowns. And if he can, he might not be able to keep Clay Guida on the ground, but a Claudio Polish submission would not surprise me. No bet from me there. And finally, all right, we're making great time. We are already at the main event, Jessica Andrade versus Amanda Lemos. I love Jessica Andrade. I always have. I've always joked that I want to be the Sam to her Clarissa, and I want her to be my best friend, where I put if you watch Clarissa Explains It All, this is I'm showing my age here a little bit, but Sam was Clarissa's best friend who would put the ladder against the house and then climb in the window, and they would talk about life and growing up and whatever. Yeah, I want Jessica Andrade to be my platonic lesbian best friend. Anyway, I think Amanda Lemos is awesome too. I think Amanda Lemos is, somebody who might be sort of the future of this division. Although here's the weird thing about that. You think of Jessica Andrade as being or I do anyway. I think of Jessica Andrade as somebody who's been around forever and might be creeping up on the end of her career. Jessica Andrade is 30 years old, you guys. She's 30 years old. She is probably just in her prime right now, entering her prime. She is probably the best that she's going to be right now. She's somebody that I would think would be 34, 35 at this point at least, but she's not. Anyway, Amanda Lemos is a sniper. She's a lot of fun to watch. She throws hard, accurate, well-timed strikes, and she's dangerous. She hits very hard, especially early in the fight. She's strong and athletic. She's got a tight technical Muay Thai game. She's especially dangerous if you let her dictate the space and give her room to work. She does have some decent positional grappling. She does have some good ground and pound. She's the kind of striker who looks to hurt you with big strikes. She's looking for quality of strikes over quantity. She's not like somebody who's looking to do the Diaz style where she's just going to, death by 1,000 cuts, or she's going to hit you a lot. She's looking to pick those big power shots and get you out of there. She's 5-1 in the UFC. Her only loss was in her UFC debut against Leslie Smith, and she's been on a 5-fight win streak since then. I think you could argue that she lost. She won a decision over Angela Hill. I think you could argue that she lost that fight. Some people have, but officially she is 5-1. Andrade is a higher volume striker than Lemos, but her accuracy is a bit lower. I don't even know what to say about Andrade. Everybody's familiar with her at this point. She's kind of been around forever, growing up in the UFC. She's an absolute powerhouse. She's got 13 wins in 20 UFC fights, including 5 KOs and 2 subs. Here's an interesting thing. See, I would have guessed that she had more KOs than that. Obviously, she's a 115-pound female fighter. You don't see a lot of KOs there, but she's kind of known for being such a powerhouse in that weight class. She has 5 KOs in the UFC. 4 of those KOs were in her last 4 wins. So let me say that again. Out of the 5, even though she's had 20 fights in the UFC, she's got 5 KOs total. 4 of those were in her last 4 wins. So like I said about her being in her prime now, that seems to be some evidence of that. She has literally finished her last 4 opponents that she's beaten, and that's pretty impressive. She's on a bit of a run there, potentially in her prime, like I said. I don't have a super detailed technical breakdown as far as how I feel this fight is going to play out, but I end up kind of just leaning on the idea that Jessica Andrade has been in there against the best in the game. She's beaten some of them. She's lost to some of them, but she's, hung in there against all of them. She's someone who has done it all and seen it all at this point. And so I do have to lean her to win this fight. Amanda Lemos is going to be dangerous early. I mean, she's going to be dangerous late too, but especially dangerous early. but I just don't think that she's going to be able to give Jessica Andrade anything that she hasn't seen before. And one thing that we don't think about a lot with Jessica Andrade, she's also a very solid wrestler and grappler. She's not necessarily thought of, she's thought of more of as the striker and the knockout threat, but she does have solid wrestling and grappling if she looks to use it. Also, we know that Jessica Andrade has the cardio and the heart to do well as fights go long. She can handle herself in a dog fight. So yeah, it's hard for me to imagine, unless Amanda Lemos is able to find an early KO, it's hard for me to imagine that Andrade isn't able to just use her veteran savvy to be able to handle whatever Lemos throws at her and take over the fight down the stretch. The betting odds here, Andrade, oh, okay, her line is moved. Andrade is like minus 188 is the best you can get her at. She's up at like minus 200, minus 210 in spots. Amanda Lemos, the best you can get her is plus 170. I did put a bet on Jessica Andrade at, I believe, minus 170. Actually, why don't we go ahead and just jump now right into the looking at my bets that I have on this card currently. If I can find it. Here it is. Okay. So I put 1.7 units on Jessica Andrade at minus 170 to win 1 unit. I put 2.2 units on Archie Lang at minus 220 to win 1 unit. Those are my only straight bets so far. Like the lines have just been getting absolutely steamed lately. This is something that people have been talking about a lot in the community, especially just in the last month or the last few months. Like lines just get crazy steamed. Like that's why I like that Martin Buday. I try not to make bets before I've done the research, but sometimes I just jump on a line because I'm like, this line's going to get out of hand and I'm just going to grab it now. Anyway, so yeah, Andrade and Archie Lang are my 2 straight bets so far. I also did put 1.55 units on Venata versus Jourdain to go over 2.5 rounds. And then I put that half unit. I don't usually be a sprinkle of 0.2, but half unit, that's not even a sprinkle anymore. That's a proper bet on Jordan Wright to win by TKO in round 1. I usually have parlays. Parlays are where I do my best work. Let's see if I look on betmma.tips here. Yeah, my ROI on parlays is 44%, and I'm hitting my parlays at 62% of the time. So that's really where I'm doing my best work. And I don't have any parlays for this card because the lines are so steamed, but yeah, I may end up adding more, but that's all I've got for you right now. All right, we got through this pretty quickly. I don't know, that wasn't even an hour, I don't think. I don't remember what time we started for sure, but anyway. 51 minutes. Duh, it shows me right here on StreamYard. Anyway, yeah, thank you so much for all of you who watch my videos, especially if you watch all the way to the end here. I really do appreciate it. Check me out on Twitter, Erik Bets Fights there. Check me out on Instagram, Erik_Bets_Fights. Obviously, you are right here on YouTube. Go ahead and give me a like down there. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would love it if you do that. Also, if you can leave me a comment, that does help me out with the algorithms and that sort of thing. I don't even care what the comment is. Tell me you agree with me. Tell me you disagree with me. Tell me you think I'm a Dumbo. It doesn't matter. I just appreciate you all being here. I will be my newer show, Big Money Bets. I'm doing that as a live stream now, Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, which would be 10 p.m. Eastern. So this week, which will be April 21st, I've got Mike from Postman Picks coming on the show. I do have guests lined up for some of these shows going forward. I've actually got Dale from Punch List MMA coming on my birthday on May 12th. So, I mean, if you guys haven't listened to Punch List MMA podcast, they're one of the biggest, most popular podcasts in the MMA betting game, and I like those guys a lot. So I'm really excited that Dale was willing to come on the show for a small fish like me who only has like 150 subscribers. So anyway, yeah, I hope that you can join me and Postman Mike tomorrow night, and then also you can find me every Saturday that there's a UFC card anyway on the DFS by the Numbers YouTube channel. We do a show called Best Bets. We start an hour before the first prelim starts. We do this for every UFC card. So whenever the UFC prelims start, go to the DFS by the Numbers YouTube channel. An hour before that, myself, DFS by the Numbers, Narco Cop, and Uncle Wheezy go through the entire card and give you our favorite bets for each one so you can get some last-minute degen action in. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, folks. I always blab a little bit too long at the end there. As always, I am Erik with Erik Bets Fights, reminding you to play it smart, Play it tight. Let's grow those bankrolls, everybody. Have a great day and enjoy the fights this weekend.